Good morning, everybody. Lee Brower here, and welcome to this week's edition of Meaningful Monday. I am grateful to be here, and I am glad to be here. My go big. Today, I'm grateful for the way God often humbles us, especially when we think we've got something figured out. And then we discover we were wrong. So let me ask you a question. This is really interesting. When you meet someone for the first, when you meet somebody for the first time, how long do you think it takes for your brain to form an opinion about them? How long? Believe it or not, numerous studies show it happens in less than a second, a fraction of a second. And by the seventh second, by 7 seconds, sounds like I'm saying the same thing. That first impression is always locked in. So the real question is how often does that first impression tell the truth? It does many times. However, let's share a story. Here's one example. Almost 20 years ago, Lori and I were invited to a conference in Colorado. We walked in, we looked around the room, and we noticed a man. Yeah, his clothes looked worn, a little shabby. And honestly, at first, we thought maybe he's the custodian. We judged him quickly and unfairly by how he looked to us. And then they introduced him as Dr. Larry Brown, one of the presenters. Not only was he a speaker, he was a founder of WAVE. WAVE, W-A-V-E, Work Achievement Values and Education, a nonprofit out of Washington, D.C. And at that time, WAVE was impacting career development, dropout prevention in over 700 schools, serving over 700,000 young people. So much for our first impression. And then he spoke. He captivated us. His teachings focused on one centered truth. Tell me and I forget. Teach me and I'll remember. But involve me and I will learn. And that's exactly what he did. He involved us. He led us through a process that really brought that principle to life. And we were so impressed that we were honored when we invited him to present at a couples conference that we hosted at the Grand Hotel in Salt Lake City. And he brought with him a young man, somebody that he had worked with since he was 12 years old. This young teenage, well, he was a freshman in college. And at age 12, he had started a business. And that business grew large enough to pay for his entire education and actually much far beyond. Just amazing. And Larry had a way of spotting potential where others might not. This man we nearly missed has created a lifelong influence for us and others. He touched thousands and thousands of lives until the day he died suddenly, surprised us all, at a Nationals baseball game. He was sitting with his son, who he hadn't seen for months. And the son thought he had just fallen asleep on his shoulder. And he went to wake him up, and it turns out that he had had a heart attack. Now, his life wasn't about involvement. His life was about lifting others, being able to see beyond the surface. And that experience left Lori and me with a lesson we'll never forget. You see, our brains are very quick to write stories based on appearances. But those first draft stories are often wrong. I love the quote. We don't see things as they are. We see them as we are. When we judge too quickly, we risk missing extraordinary people, extraordinary lessons, and extraordinary opportunities. There's a process called integration in our brain. We'll probably talk about it in a future Meaningful Monday. But it's how we start to think or we see things only from one side of the brain. But when we slow down and letting our whole brain engage, that means connecting not just with what we see, but connect with curiosity, with humility and compassion. That's how God designed us to collaborate. So here's our question for the week. Where am I judging too quickly? Ask yourself, where am I judging too quickly? And how can I pause long enough to be surprised by the story I don't yet see? Imagine how much could change in our communities, in our families, in our businesses, if we involved our whole brain before we made up our minds. As Dr. Brown reminds us, and it's a quote from Benjamin Franklin actually, that says, tell me and I forget, teach me and I remember, involve me and I learn. Let's involve ourselves in seeing the whole story and then let others surprise us. Join me next week for Meaningful Monday. Remember, gratitude in the now, choices for the future, and ripples for generations. We'll talk next week. Bye-bye.